The void of space stretched endlessly in all directions, punctuated only by distant stars that looked like scattered diamonds on black velvet. But today, this peaceful corner of the galaxy was about to become a graveyard. Admiral Zektar's mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he gazed at the tactical display aboard his flagship, the Crimson Destroyer. 300 warships of the hegemony fleet surrounded a single, battered human vessel. The contrast was almost laughable. His massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a small city, versus one tiny human ship that couldn't be larger than a civilian. Transport. Admiral, his tactical officer hissed through his breathing apparatus. The human ship is broadcasting on all frequencies. The single quotes asking to surrender. Zektar's four eyes narrowed. In his 50 years of military service, no species had ever posed a real threat to the hegemony. Humans were just the latest to be brought under their rule. These soft pink creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable solar system had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were primitive, their ships small and fragile. No. Zektar clicked his claws against his command chair. The High Council was very clear. Make an example of them. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who resist the hegemony's expansion. On the human ship Defiant, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the center of her bridge, her hand steady despite the impossible odds facing her crew. The ship groaned around, them hull plates barely holding together after their running battle across 3 star systems. Her crew of 37 souls looked to her with a mixture of fear and determination. Captain, her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, spoke quietly. They're not responding to our surrender request. Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd hoped to save her crew, but deep down, she'd known this moment would come. The hegemony didn't take prisoners. They took examples. Dr. Yuki, she called to the figure hunched over a console at the back of the bridge. Status report. Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked up from her work, her usually calm demeanor cracked with exhaustion. The quantum physicist had been working for 72 hours straight, her hands dancing over controls that most of her crewmates couldn't even begin to understand. The device is ready, Captain, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I need you to understand, once we activate it, there's no going back. The quantum cascade reaction will, Doctor, Sarah interrupted gently, in simple terms. Yuki's eyes met hers across the bridge. It will work, but the cost. She swallowed hard. The cost might be everything. Through the view screen, the hegemony fleet began to move. Massive ships, each bristling with enough firepower to glass a planet, closed in like predators circling wounded prey. All ships came. Admiral Zektar's voice across the communication channels, prepare to fire. Let's finish this. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of earth-blue skies, green fields, children playing in parks. When she opened them again, her expression was steel. Dr. Tanaka, she said quietly, activate the device. Yuki's finger hesitated over the control panel. Captain, the mathematical models suggest that if the quantum field destabilizes, Doctor. Sarah's voice cut through her words like a blade. Activate it, now. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of systems and the distant rumble of the hegemony ship's engines. Every crew member held their breath. Yuki pressed the button. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, deep in the Defiant's modified cargo bay, something impossible began to occur. A small device no larger than a briefcase started to emit a mata-mata sound that wasn't quite a sound of vibration that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the soul. Energy readings are... Captain, this can't be right, the science officer called out, his voice cracking. The quantum field is expanding exponentially. On the hegemony flagship, alarms began to scream. Admiral, The tactical officer's voice rose to a panic. Something's wrong with the human ship. Energy signatures are off the charts. Zektar leaned forward in his command chair. On the main screen, the tiny human vessel began to glow not with the harsh light of weapons charging, but with something else. Something that made his exoskeleton crawl with an ancient, primal fear. "What are they doing?" he demanded. Before anyone could answer, the glow around the Defiant pulsed once, like a dying star's final breath. And then everything changed. The pulse spread outward from the human ship at the speed of light, invisible but carrying with it something that would reshape the very foundations of reality. As it passed through the hegemony fleet, ship systems flickered. Navigation computers sparked. Weapon arrays powered down and refused to restart. "Report!" Zektar roared, but his crew was too busy trying to understand what was happening to their previously invincible war machines. "Sir," his chief engineer's voice came through the communication system, filled with disbelief. "All our quantum-based systems are failing. Navigation, weapons, life support backup systems, everything that relies on quantum mechanics has just stopped working." Zektar felt his world tilt. Quantum mechanics was the foundation of their technology, their civilization, their power. It was impossible for it to simply stop working. But as he watched, ship after ship in his fleet began to drift, dark and powerless. "The human ship," he whispered, his 4 eyes locked on the view screen where the Defiant still glowed like a small star. "What have they done?" Captain Chun stood on her bridge, watching the impossible scene unfold around them. 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, each one capable of destroying entire planets, now floated helplessly in space like ancient sailing ships becalmed in still waters. "Dr. Tanaka," she said quietly, "what exactly did we just do?" Yuki looked up from her console, her face pale but her eyes bright with the fever of a scientist who had just witnessed something that rewrote the laws of physics. "Captain," she said slowly, "I think we just changed the rules of the universe." The pulse continued to expand, racing away from the battle at light speed, carrying with it a fundamental alteration to reality itself. It would reach the nearest star system in 4 years, the galactic core in 25,000 years, and everywhere it passed, the quantum universe would never be the same again. In the silence of the drifting hegemony fleet, Admiral Zektar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He activated his personal communication device, one of the few systems on his ship that still functioned. "This is Admiral Zektar to all Hegemony Command," he broadcast across subspace. "Code Black Emergency. Retreat from all human territories immediately. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage the humans under any circumstances." His tactical officer stared at him in disbelief. "Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that 37 humans just defeated our entire fleet?" Zektar's mandibles clicked slowly as he watched the Defiant floating serenely among his disabled ships. "No," he said quietly. "I'm suggesting they just defeated the entire galaxy." 3 days after what would become known as the Chun event, the Defiant drifted through space like a ghost ship among the scattered hulks of the Hegemony fleet. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the human vessel's bridge as Captain Sarah Chun reviewed the damage reports that kept streaming in. "Hull integrity at 60% and falling," reported Chief Engineer Rodriguez, his usually steady voice tight with exhaustion. "We've got microfractures spreading through the quantum manifold chamber. The device burned out 3 of our main power conduits." Sarah nodded grimly. The Defiant was dying, slowly but surely. The quantum cascade device had saved them from the Hegemony fleet, but at a cost none of them had fully understood until now. "Captain," Dr. Tanaka called from her science station, her voice carrying a strange mixture of excitement and terror. I'm picking up transmissions from across the galaxy. The pulse ... it's still spreading. On the main screen, a star chart appeared, showing a sphere of influence expanding outward from their position. Within that sphere, represented by a slowly growing red zone, quantum-based technology simply didn't work anymore. How is that possible? Lieutenant Torres asked from his communications station. I thought quantum mechanics was, well, universal? Dr. Tanaka turned from her console, her eyes bright with the fever of discovery and horror. It was. Until 3 days ago, the quantum field was a fundamental constant throughout the universe. What we did ... She paused, struggling to find words. For the impossible. We introduced a localized variance in the quantum field itself. We changed one of the basic rules of physics. In simple terms, Doctor, Sarah said quietly, we broke the universe, Captain, and it's staying broken. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems. Through the view screen, they could see several hegemony ships attempting to restart their engines, their hulls sparking with electrical discharges as systems that had worked flawlessly for centuries refused to function. Incoming transmission, Torres announced. It's from the hegemony flagship, on screen. Admiral Zektar S. insectoid features filled the view screen, his 4 eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Behind him, his bridge was illuminated only by emergency lighting, and Sarah could see crew members working frantically at manual controls. Captain Chun, he began, his translator struggling with the unfamiliar concepts he was trying to express. What have you done to us? Sarah stood, her uniform wrinkled and stained from 3 days of crisis management. We defended ourselves, Admiral, nothing more. Defended yourselves? Zektar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or rage. You've crippled every ship in my fleet. Our quantum computers are useless. Our navigation systems are dead. Our weapons, he gestured to something off-screen. Our weapons that could crack planets now have all the power of ancient chemical projectiles. Dr. Tanaka leaned forward in her chair. Admiral, if I may ask, what's the status of your life support? Backup systems only, Zektar replied. All quantum-enhanced life support has failed. We have perhaps weeks of emergency power. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She'd wanted to disable the hegemony fleet, not commit genocide. Doctor, is there any way to reverse what we've done? Yuki shook her head slowly. The cascade was designed to be self-perpetuating. Even if we could rebuild the device, we can't. Uncook an egg. The quantum field alteration is permanent. Then we're all dead, Zektar said flatly. My fleet, your ship, and everyone else in the expanding zone of influence. When our emergency power runs out, not necessarily, Dr. Tanaka interrupted, her fingers flying over her console. Captain, I'm detecting something interesting. The quantum field isn't completely dead, it's been altered. Changed. Some technologies might still work, but they'd have to be designed around the new parameters. She brought up a series of equations on the main screen that made Sarah's head hurt just looking at them. The quantum variance has shifted the fundamental constants by approximately 0.3%. It's enough to break existing quantum technology, but not enough to prevent new technology from functioning. We just need to completely redesign everything from the ground up. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his station. Captain, I'm picking up more transmissions. Long-range communications from outside the affected zone. It sounds like ... double quotes. He paused, adjusting his controls. It sounds like panic. Put it through. The view screen shifted to show a series of communication feeds from across the galaxy. News broadcasts, military communications, scientific reports, all carrying the same message of confusion and growing terror. Quantum research facility on Kepler 442b has gone completely dark. Double quotes double caught entire star system's technology has failed. 17 billion inhabitants requesting immediate evacuation. Expansion rate suggests the effect will reach the galactic core in 25,000 years. Economic collapse as quantum-based currency systems fail across 47 worlds. Sarah sank into her captain's chair as the weight of what they'd done began to settle on her shoulders. They'd won the battle, but at what cost? Admiral, she said, turning back to Zektar's image on the screen, our ships are dying, all of our ships. We need to work together if any of us are going to survive. Zektar's 4 eyes studied her for a long moment. In his species' long history of conquest, cooperation with a defeated enemy was almost unthinkable. But these were unprecedented circumstances. What do you propose? He asked finally. A temporary alliance. Pool our resources, share our knowledge. Dr. Tanaka believes it might be possible to develop new technology that can function within the altered quantum field. And after we survive? If we survive? Sarah met his alien gaze steadily. Then we figure out how to live in the universe we've created. Before Zektar could respond, alarms began blaring on both ships. Dr. Tanaka's hands flew over her controls. As new data flooded her sensors, Captain, she called out, her voice tight with alarm. The quantum cascade, it's not just affecting technology. I'm detecting gravitational anomalies near the edge of the affected zone. The altered quantum field is interacting with local space-time in ways I didn't predict. On the screen, she brought up a real-time image of a nearby star system. As they watched, one of the outer planets seemed to flicker, its orbit suddenly shifting as the expanding quantum alteration reached it. Is the planet? Torres began. Phase shifting, Dr. Tanaka finished. The interaction between normal space-time and the altered quantum field is creating localized distortions. Some objects are being displaced into parallel dimensional phases. Admiral. Zektar's image leaned forward. Are you saying that your weapon isn't just breaking our technology, it's tearing holes in reality itself? Dr. Tanaka nodded grimly. The universe is trying to compensate for the quantum field alteration, but instead of adapting smoothly, it's creating ... corrections, violent ones. As if to emphasize her point, another alarm sounded. This time, it was from the Defiance navigation system. Captain, Chief Engineer Rodriguez called from his station. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive gravitational anomaly, approximately 12 light-years from our position. It's growing. Sarah felt the deck plates beneath her feet vibrate as something fundamental in the fabric of space-time groaned under the strain of unprecedented change. Dr. Tanaka, she said quietly, what have we unleashed? The quantum physicist stared at her readouts, her face pale with the weight of discovery and responsibility. I don't know, Captain, but I don't think we're going to like finding out. Through the view screen, the stars seemed to shimmer slightly as if reality itself had developed a fever. 2 weeks after the Chun event, the makeshift alliance between human and hegemony survivors had accomplished the impossible. They were still alive. Barely the Defiant and 5 hegemony vessels that had managed to restore minimal life support were now traveling together through the expanding zone of quantum alteration, heading toward a system that Dr. Tanaka's calculations suggested might offer temporary refuge, but space itself was fighting them every step of the way. Captain Sarah Chun stood in what used to be the Defiant's main conference room, now serving as the Alliance's Joint Command Center. The room was crowded with an unlikely mixture of humans and hegemony officers. Their bitter enemies just 2 weeks ago, now working side by side to survive the consequences of humanity's desperate gambit. The gravitational anomalies are getting worse, reported Commander Vexhai, Zektar's chief science officer. His translator gave his words a mechanical quality, but the concern was unmistakable. We've detected 17 separate reality tiers in the last 48 hours. Dr. Tanaka nodded grimly from her position at the central display table. The quantum cascade is creating a feedback loop with local spacetime. Every time the alteration encounters a massive gravitational field, a star, a black hole, even a large planet, it creates instabilities. Show them, Sarah said quietly. The holographic display in the center of the room shifted to show a real-time map of local space. Red zones marked areas where the quantum alteration had taken hold, but scattered throughout were angry orange and yellow spots, the reality tiers that were spreading like an infection. This one, Dr. Tanaka highlighted a particularly large. Distortion used to be a binary star system. When the quantum cascade reached it, the interaction between the altered field and the star's gravitational wells created a localized spacetime collapse. Both stars and their 6 planets just ceased to exist in our dimensional framework. Admiral Zektar, who had transferred to the Defiant when his flagship's life support finally failed completely, clicked his mandibles nervously. Gone where? That's the terrifying part, Dr. Tanaka replied. We don't know. They might have been shifted to a parallel dimension, compressed into a quantum singularity, or simply erased from existence entirely. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Through the view screen, they could see the distorted light of a nearby nebula, its colors shifting and swirling in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Captain, Lieutenant Torres spoke up from his mobile communications station. I'm receiving a priority transmission from outside the affected zone. It's from Earth. Sarah's heart clenched. Put it through. The display shifted to show the face of Admiral Rebecca Morrison, Sarah's former commanding officer and mentor. The woman who had once been a source of strength and wisdom now looked haggard, aged years in the 2 weeks since the Chen event. Sarah, Morrison began, her voice carrying across the light years with a weight of sorrow and responsibility. I hope this message reaches you. The situation here is ... complex. The image flickered slightly, a sign that even long-range communications were being affected by the expanding quantum alteration. The United Earth government has declared you and your crew heroes for stopping the hegemony invasion. The propaganda broadcasts are calling it humanity's greatest victory. But Sarah ... double quotes Morrison paused, her expression grim. The scientists are calling it something else entirely. The display shifted to show images from Earth crowds celebrating in the streets, monuments being erected, children wearing uniforms that bore the Defiance insignia. But underneath the celebration, Sarah could see something else in the footage. Fear. Our quantum physicists have run the models, Morrison continued. They estimate that the cascade effect will reach Earth in approximately 18 months. When it does, every piece of quantum-based technology on the planet will fail simultaneously. Transportation, communication, power generation, medical equipment, all of it. Sarah closed her eyes. Earth's population was approaching 12 billion. Almost all of them dependent on technology that would become useless when the quantum alteration arrived. The casualties ... Morrison's voice broke slightly. Conservative estimates suggest we could lose 60% of the population in the first year alone. Famine, disease, social collapse, it would make the old wars look like minor disagreements. Admiral Zektar spoke for the first time since the transmission began. The same fate awaits every advanced civilization in the galaxy. My homeworld, the core systems, The outer colonies, all of them, will face technological collapse when the alteration reaches them. Dr. Tanaka was frantically working at her console, bringing up new calculations and models. Captain, there might be a way to slow the expansion. If we could create a localized quantum field stabilizer, we might be able to reduce the cascade's propagation speed. Might? Sarah asked. The mathematics are incredibly complex, and we'd need resources we don't have. But theoretically, yes, we could buy the galaxy time to adapt. How much time? Instead of reaching the galactic core in 25,000 years, we might extend that to 50,000. Maybe more. Commander Vexhai leaned forward. Doctor, what would such a device require? A quantum computer more powerful than anything ever built, exotic matter with specific gravitational properties, and a power source roughly equivalent to a small star. Dr. Tanaka looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Oh, and we'd have to build it at the exact center of the expanding alteration zone, right here where we are now. The silence that followed was deafening. There is something else. Morrison's recorded message continued. Long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements throughout hegemony space. It appears that their central command has interpreted the Chun event not as an accident, but as a deliberate attack. Intelligence suggests they're assembling a revenge fleet, everything they have that still functions outside the affected zone. Sarah felt her blood run cold. How many ships? Approximately 50,000 vessels, Captain. They're calling it the Final Armada. Admiral Zektar's four eyes went wide. 50,000? That's the entire reserve fleet from the Outer Rim territories. Ships that have never seen combat, held in reserve for existential threats. They consider humanity an existential threat now, Sarah said quietly. They're not wrong, Dr. Tanaka added soberly. We've effectively declared war on the laws of physics. Themselves. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his communication station. Captain, I'm detecting massive subspace distortions on the edge of our sensor range. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. The main view screen shifted to show long-range scanner data. Even at maximum magnification, the approaching fleet looked like a swarm of angry insects, their formation precise and deadly. Time to intercept? Sarah asked. At their current speed, approximately 6 hours, Torres replied. Sarah looked around the room at the mixture of human and hegemony officers who had become unlikely allies in the face of universal catastrophe. 2 weeks ago, they had been enemies. Now they were all that stood between the galaxy and either technological collapse or complete annihilation. Dr. Tanaka, she said quietly, how long would you need to build your quantum field stabilizer? Assuming we had all the necessary materials and a miracle or two. 3 days minimum, Sarah nodded. Admiral Zektar, can your remaining ships fight? The insectoid officer's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Our weapons are severely limited without quantum targeting systems, but we have manual backup controls. Against 50,000 ships? He paused. We would be destroyed in minutes. Then we don't fight, Sarah decided. We run. And while we run, we build Dr. Tanaka's device. Captain, Commander Vexhai interjected, there's nowhere to run to. The quantum alteration zone extends in all directions. Any ship that enters it loses most of its capability. Exactly, Sarah replied, a grim smile crossing her face. Which means the Final Armada will have the same limitations we do once they cross the boundary. It won't be 50,000 advanced warships hunting us. It'll be 50,000 barely functional hulks stumbling around in the dark. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her calculations. Captain, that's brilliant. Inside the alteration zone, we're all equally disadvantaged. It becomes a matter of who can adapt fastest to the new rules. And humans, Admiral Zektar said slowly, have always been disturbingly good at adaptation. Through the view screen, the stars shimmered again, reality itself trembling under the strain of what they had unleashed. In 6 hours, the largest fleet in galactic history would arrive seeking vengeance. But first, they would have to survive entering a region of space where the fundamental laws of physics had been rewritten by human desperation. Sarah looked around the room one more time at the faces of beings who had become her allies in the fight for the galaxy's survival. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored aliens," she said formally, "let's go break some more laws of physics." The final armada arrived like a plague of locusts, 50,000 ships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. From a distance, they were magnificent, the accumulated might of the hegemony's outer rim territories representing dozens of species and centuries of military engineering. Captain Sarah Chun watched them approach on the Defiant's main screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 36 hours, her unlikely alliance had managed something that should have been impossible. They'd begun construction of Dr. Tanaka's quantum field stabilizer. The device itself was a makeshift miracle, cobbled together from parts salvaged from disabled hegemony vessels and powered by the Defiant's dying reactor. It wouldn't win any engineering awards, but according to Dr. Tanaka's calculations, it might just work. "Fleet Admiral Krixtak is broadcasting on all frequencies," Lieutenant Torres reported. "He's demanding our immediate surrender." "Put him through," Sarah ordered. The view screen filled with the image of a being that looked like a cross between a mantis and a shark, its multiple eyes glowing with cold intelligence and barely contained rage. Fleet Admiral Krixtak was a legend among the hegemony, a tactical genius who had never lost a battle in 40 years of service. "Captain Chun," his voice carried the weight of absolute authority, "you will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Your crimes against the natural order end today." Sarah stood, her posture straight despite the weight of exhaustion and responsibility on her shoulders. "Admiral, I don't think you understand the situation. The quantum cascade has altered the fundamental structure of space-time itself in this region. Your ships will lose most of their capabilities the moment they cross the boundary." Krixtak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "We are aware of your weapons effects, human. That is why we have adapted." The long-range sensors suddenly lit up with new readings. Dr. Tanaka's voice rose in alarm from her science station. "Captain, they're not using quantum-based technology. The entire fleet has been retrofitted with pre-quantum systems. Combustion engines, chemical weapons, manual targeting systems, everything they've built is designed to function in the altered zone." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. While her ragtag alliance had been struggling just to survive, the hegemony had spent 2 weeks completely retrofitting 50,000 ships for warfare in a quantum dead zone. "You see," Krixtak continued, his image leaning forward with predatory satisfaction, "we learned from our mistakes. Where you have made gods of yourselves by breaking the universe's laws, we have made ourselves devils by embracing the primitive. And devils, Captain Chen, are very good at destruction." The first wave of hegemony ships crossed into the quantum alteration zone, and the change was immediately visible. Their sleek hulls, once glowing with quantum field manipulators, now looked crude and brutal. But they kept coming, their formation unbroken. 20 minutes to weapons range, reported Chief Engineer Rodriguez from his jury-rigged tactical station. Sarah turned to Admiral Zektar, who had been silent during the exchange with Krixtak. "Admiral, will your people follow orders from a human captain?" Zektar's 4 eyes met hers steadily. "In the last 2 weeks, you have shown more honor than Fleet Admiral Krixtak has shown in 40 years of conquest. My surviving officers will follow your orders." "Dr. Tanaka," Sarah called, "status on the stabilizer?" 12 hours minimum to complete the quantum field calculations. The device itself could be activated now, but without proper calibration, it might make things worse instead of better. Define worse. Instead of slowing the cascade expansion, we could accelerate it, or create a quantum feedback loop that tears a hole in space-time large enough to swallow the entire star system. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of the impossible choices that had led them to this point. When she opened them again, her expression was granite hard. "Do it anyway, Captain?" Dr. Tanaka's voice cracked with disbelief. "You heard me. Activate the device now, uncalibrated. If we're all going to die, let's at least make it memorable." Admiral Zektar clicked his mandibles approvingly. "I begin to understand why your species troubles the hegemony so much." Dr. Tanaka's hands hovered over her controls for a moment before her scientific curiosity overcame her caution. Activating quantum field stabilizer in 3.2.1. Deep. In the Defiance modified cargo bay, the makeshift device hummed to life. Unlike the original Cascade device, this one didn't emit the soul-deep vibration that had changed everything 2 weeks ago. Instead, it produced a sound like reality itself taking a deep breath. Energy readings are ... Dr. Tanaka paused, checking her instruments twice. "This is impossible." The device is working perfectly. Not only is it slowing the cascade expansion, it's creating localized zones of quantum stability within the altered field. On the main screen, the effect was visible as shimmering patches of space where the stars stopped flickering and resumed their normal, steady light. "Fleet Admiral Crickstack is broadcasting again," Torres announced. On screen, the Hegemony commander's image was noticeably less confident than before. Behind him, Sarah could see crew members working frantically at their stations. "What have you done now, human?" "We've given you a choice, Admiral," Sarah replied calmly. "Some of your ships are now in zones of restored quantum function. Their advanced systems will work again. But some are still in the altered zones, limited to primitive systems. You can either press your attack with a divided fleet, or you can work with us to stabilize the entire region." "Never." Crickstack snarled. "The Hegemony does not negotiate with terrorists." But even as he spoke, Sarah could see doubt in his multiple eyes. A fleet divided between quantum-capable and quantum-dead zones would be strategically chaotic. Ships with different capabilities, different speeds, different weapons ranges, it would be a tactical nightmare. "Captain," Dr. Tanaka called out, "I'm detecting something else. The stabilizer is having an unexpected side effect." Before she could explain, the view screen suddenly filled with new contacts. Ships were appearing out of nowhere, not dropping out of hyperspace, but simply materializing as if they had always been there. "Are those?" Torres began. "The missing vessels," Dr. Tanaka finished, her voice filled with wonder. "The ships and planets that were displaced by the reality tears. The quantum stabilization field is bringing them back from wherever they were sent." Admiral Zektar leaned forward in his chair. "Including the 2-star systems that vanished last week?" "Not just bringing them back," Dr. Tanaka continued, her excitement growing, "but bringing them back with knowledge of wherever they've been. Captain, we're receiving data transmissions from the recovered ships. They've been to parallel dimensions, alternate timelines, even universes where the laws of physics work differently." Sarah stared at the flood of new information appearing on their screens. Star charts of impossible galaxies, scientific data that redefined their understanding of reality, contact records with civilizations that existed in dimensions they couldn't even perceive. "Fleet Admiral," she said, turning back to Crickstack's image, "we've just accidentally opened the door to infinite possibilities. Every ship you've lost to the quantum cascade, Every world that's been displaced, we can bring them all back. But only if we work together. For the first time since she'd known him, Admiral Zektar looked genuinely stunned. Captain, are you suggesting that your quantum field stabilizer can rescue the billions of beings we thought were lost forever? I'm suggesting something more than that, Sarah replied, her mind racing with the implications. Dr. Tanaka, what happens if we fully stabilize the quantum field throughout the affected zone? The physicist was already running calculations, her fingers flying over her controls. If we can build larger stabilizers and position them at key points throughout the Cascade Zone, Captain, we could create controlled quantum variation fields, regions where we can adjust the laws of physics, locally, temporarily. Meaning we could create zones optimized for different types of technology, different forms of life, different approaches to civilization. Instead of one universe with one set of rules, we could have a galaxy where each system operates under conditions chosen by its inhabitants. The bridge fell silent as the magnitude of what she was suggesting sank in. Fleet Admiral Krixtak's image flickered as his ship systems struggled with the localized quantum variations. You're proposing to turn the galaxy into your laboratory. I'm proposing to turn it into something better, Sarah countered. A place where every species can thrive under conditions suited to their nature, where the laws of physics serve the needs of life instead of constraining it. Through the view screen, the final armada hung motionless in space, 50,000 ships caught between the primitive brutality they had embraced and the impossible promise of controlled reality. Dr. Tanaka, Sarah said quietly, how long would it take to build a full stabilization network? With the resources of both our fleets? Months, maybe years. But Captain ... She paused, looking at the data streaming in from the recovered vessels. Some of these ships have been to places where time moves differently. They've had subjective years to develop new technologies, new understanding. With their help, we could build a network in weeks. Sarah looked around the bridge at the faces of humans and aliens who had become her partners in reshaping reality itself. 2 weeks ago, they had been enemies facing mutual destruction. Now they stood on the threshold of transforming the galaxy into something unprecedented. Fleet Admiral Krixtak, she said formally, I'm officially requesting a ceasefire. Matt? Surrender, not victory, but cooperation. Help us build a galaxy where every species can write their own rules of existence. The hegemony commander was silent for a long moment, his multiple eyes studying her face. Behind him, Sarah could see his tactical officers reviewing the flood of new data, their expressions changing from hostility to wonder. And if I refuse? He asked finally. Sarah's expression remained steady, but her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then you'll spend the rest of your existence fighting a war against the fundamental forces of reality itself. And Admiral Reality doesn't negotiate. As if to emphasize her point, another wave of displaced ships materialized around the fleet, these ones bearing the insignia of species that had been extinct for millennia. The view screen showed vessels of impossible design, their hulls inscribed with equations that made Dr. Tanaka gasp in recognition. Captain, she whispered, those ships ... They're from civilizations that learned to manipulate the quantum cascade. They've mastered controlled reality alteration. Fleet Admiral Krixtak's image flickered again, but this time it wasn't due to technical difficulties. His ship was being scanned by technologies that operated under completely different physical laws, and his crew was struggling to understand what they were detecting. This is Commander Thel Vax of the Eternal Seekers. Came a new voice over the communication channels. The screen split to show a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline framework, a member of a species that had transcended physical existence 2 million years ago, We have observed your conflict from our dimensional refuge. The human's proposal has merit. Who are you to speak here? Krixtak demanded, but his aggressive tone carried an undertone of fear. We are what the hegemony could become, Felvax replied calmly, if you chose evolution over extinction. The quantum cascade has created an opportunity that occurs, perhaps, once in a universe's lifetime, the chance to rewrite the basic rules of existence. More ships continue to appear, a growing fleet of vessels from realities where the impossible was commonplace. Sarah watched the tactical display with growing amazement as hundreds, then thousands of displaced craft materialized around them. Dr. Tanaka, she said quietly, are all of these ships from our timeline originally? Some are, the physicist replied, her voice tight with excitement. But others, Captain, some of these vessels are from alternate versions of our galaxy, where the quantum cascade happened differently. We're not just recovering our lost ships, we're making contact with parallel versions of ourselves. On one of the auxiliary screens, an image appeared that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. It was another Defiant, identical to their own but bearing subtle differences, cleaner hull plating, more advanced sensors, and a crew that looked exactly like her own people but wore unfamiliar uniforms. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Defiant, came a voice that was unmistakably her own but carrying the confidence of someone who had made different choices. We've been waiting 2 subjective years for the quantum field to stabilize enough for contact. Sarah stared at her alternate self. On the screen, 2 years? Time moves differently in the quantum flux dimensions, her other self explained. We've had time to study the cascade effects, to develop new technologies, to learn from civilizations that exist outside normal space-time. The stabilization network you're planning to build? We've already built it in 17 different configurations. Fleet. Admiral Krixtak's image was growing fainter as his ship system struggled with the reality distortions created by thousands of vessels operating under different physical laws. This is madness, he muttered. The natural order, interrupted Commander Felvax, is chaos, entropy, and eventual heat death. What the humans have offered is the chance to create a chosen order physics that serves life instead of constraining it. Another voice joined the conversation, this one from Admiral Zektar's alternate self, commanding a hegemony ship that bore the insignia of scientific exploration rather than military conquest. In our timeline, the other Zektar explained, the hegemony chose cooperation over conquest when the cascade began. We've spent the equivalent of 50 years developing quantum field manipulation technology. Our worlds now exist in zones optimized for each species' biological and cultural needs. The original Admiral Zektar leaned forward in his chair. Show me. The view screen filled with images from the alternate timeline. Hegemony worlds where the harsh atmospheres had been locally modified to support diverse life forms, where species that had been enemies for millennia now worked together on projects that redefined the meaning of civilization. Impossible, Fleet Admiral Krixtak whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Tanaka was frantically reviewing the data streams from the alternate ships. Captain, they're transmitting complete technical specifications for quantum field. Manipulators, reality stabilizers, localized physics controllers. With this information, we could build the stabilization network in days instead of months. What's the catch? Sarah asked, knowing there had to be one. The power requirements are enormous, her alternate self replied over the communication channel. Building a galaxy-wide network of reality manipulators would require the energy output of approximately 100 stars. The bridge fell silent as the magnitude of that requirement sank in. However, Commander Thelvax added, the displaced. Vessels carry with them the knowledge of how to construct stellar energy collectors that operate in quantum-altered space. With the combined resources of all our timelines, the project becomes feasible. Fleet Admiral Krixtak's image was now barely visible, his ship's systems failing under the strain of existing in a region where multiple versions of reality were overlapping. "Even if what you're proposing is possible," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of military thinking, "why should the hegemony trust human promises? You've already demonstrated your willingness to break the universe, to get your way."